going to be talking about the personal characteristics for citizen participation and empowerment. So, while there may be many features or qualities of an individual who is empowered and engages in citizen participation, Dalton and his colleagues have actually focused on these six, which is what we're going to be discussing in this lecture. Let's start with the first one, which is critical awareness. Critical awareness means the ability to evaluate, analyze information in order to form a judgment. So, in context of citizen participation, in context of a community life, actually, critical awareness is the ability to understand how power functions in the society, in the community, how the social, political, cultural, gendered forces affect an individual or a group of individuals in a particular community. So it's the ability to understand who's the oppressor, who's being oppressed, what is the nature of relationship between the oppressor and the oppressed, the dominant groups, the submissive groups. It involves understanding internalization of one's submission, and also what are some of the cultural, traditional, social myths, features, learnings that are sustaining these hierarchies of power. What this means is that the power structure in a society, in a community, is very difficult to change. So the dominant group continues to remain a dominant group for a very long period of time, and these relationships between the dominant and the submissive groups gets replicated over a period of time. So the awareness and understanding of power structure in a particular community is what critical awareness, this particular characteristic, is about. Now, how does one get critical awareness? Now, this is um, something that a lot of people wonder. uh, how can I be more critically aware? In fact, the goal of all higher education is to instill a sense of critical awareness in the students. But can you teach people to be critically aware? Yes, of course. For some people, critical awareness comes from life experiences with injustice. So, when you yourself have gone through injustice, maybe as an LGBT community member, maybe as your gender, maybe as your class, as your caste category, you have experienced oppression in your personal lives. So, reflecting on those experiences and what you've learned from those experiences, along with engaging in dialogue with other people and understanding other people's experiences along with your own experiences, can become this source of developing and honing critical awareness in your life. Now, there are these two cognitive elements that are related to critical awareness, that judgment, critical judgment about situations, and search for underlying causes of problem and their consequences. So, if you have a particular problem in a community, perhaps the problem is that women do not participate in decision making at a community level. So, engaging in what could be the possible causes of women's roles, such roles in society, and what are the what happens because of lack of participation of women. Now, essentially, critical awareness is trying to cover these particular questions. Who holds the power to define what a problem in a community is and what isn't? So, for instance, you have you may have heard that if a man does not have the right to say that I didn't say anything which should make a woman feel uncomfortable. You do not have that power. It's the woman who feels uncomfortable and who has the power to call any and all action of yours, of any man, to be discomforting. So it's the oppressor, the dominant group does not and should not hold the power to determine what is oppressing and what is not oppressing. So, critical awareness is thinking along the lines of who is defining the problems, How are decisions in a community being made? Who are the people who are participating, and who are the people who are being excluded? Whose views are respected, whose views are excluded? Power kiske paas hai, and how are the people who hold this power, how are they using that power? Finally, and most importantly, how can this power structure, oppressive power structure, be challenged or changed? Next is participatory skills. So participatory skills actually is an umbrella term that consists of number of what we'd call behavioral activities. And what are those behavioral activities? To begin with, it is to be able to articulate the community's problem using critical awareness. That for using critical awareness, you're able to arrive at women do not have political representation in our community, for instance. Then you not only so a lot of people have this, including me. I think I do have a lot of critical awareness, that I can actually talk a lot about the problems, but that is just half work done, because the other half is, if this is the problem, then how can things be made better? So, imagining and articulating how the community can be made better, assertively and constructively advocating one's views, constructively being a very key point. Uh, Fourth, actively listening to others, including opponents. So, good participatory skills involve not only listening to your own, actually, it means not involving yourself or in an echo chamber where the views that you hold are the ones that are being repeated again and again and are being reinforced. So, people who hold different opinions from you, respecting their opinion and listening to their actively listening to their opinions is also an important skill. Identifying and cultivating personal and community resources. Change is a long drawn process, as you have probably now understood. The second order changes that community psychology focuses on. And for this long drawn process, the fight, you can call it, or the activism, you can call it, it requires you to cultivate, cherish community assets and individual assets and resources, including time, money, skills, allies, social capital, which is sorry, time and money and skills and allies are tangible, whereas social capital, status, legitimacy, all of these are intangible resources. Relating well to people of diverse cultures and experiences. I think these 2 points are related. So, when you respect diversity, diversity involves, it's actually very difficult because it involves you to open up to and respect people who are different from you. They could be opponents, what you would call that, okay, this person is my opponent, or they could be people who just have are different from you in many different ways. It could be caste, culture, gender, background, food, eating habits, etc. When you're working with people on the grassroots level, collaborative and not hierarchical relationship. So the important part is that you do not replace one oppressive system with another oppressive system. Identifying, managing, and resolving conflict. As we've already talked in another lecture previously, that the thing about diversity is, or respecting diversity, engaging with diversity, which is inevitable, of course, in a community setup, is that there will be and there are a lot of opportunities and chances for conflicts between those diverse experiences and cultures. So, the ability to resolve the conflicts, planning strategies for community change, of course, finding, using, and providing social support. This is something that we'll discuss towards the end, the last characteristic. We'll discuss that in detail. Avoiding burnout and finding ways to sustain commitment. So, this is important. I'm sure you've also experienced this, whenever you start any new activity, there's a lot of zeal, there's a lot of excitement, and you feel like you can probably, you know, go on doing this for a very long period of time, but that doesn't happen. Soon you'll realize, for any sustainable change, for any you can call an any movement, social movement perhaps, you need to find ways of sustaining it over a period of time. You need to find ways so that you yourself don't burn out. So I remember in one of the lectures we talked about how a lot of theater, drama, music, nukkad natak, poetry, why are these used in protests? And the reason is that these it's one of the ways of for people not only to invest their energy in it, but to sustain their commitment in a creative fashion. And finally and lastly, sharing leadership and power. This is closely related to this point. Um, the leader, of course, has a different role to play than the other members of the community. But leader may not necessarily mean an autocratic leader. We are talking about democratic leader. And in democracy, there is power sharing. So, as an individual, the ability to share power with other groups of people, it may manifest itself in mentorship or training other, especially people who are younger than you, to take the movement forward. It could mean to share power with your colleagues. It means not micromanaging. Next, sense of personal participatory efficacy. Simply put, this characteristic means the confidence that you can be an effective leader in citizen action. This is very important. Citizen action. So, the confidence that you can take a movement forward, you can lead. This confidence, which is not simply a feeling of being empowered. By feeling of empowered, it does not mean just this overwhelming sense of being holier than thou or better than other people. It must be connected to behavioral participation. What this means is that these skills that we just talked about in the previous slide, so along with the belief that you can effectively lead a movement, you can effectively engage in citizen participation and influence community decision. How do you do that? Through all of these skills that we discussed in the previous slide. Next is sense of collective efficacy. Critical awareness and behavioral skills alone will seldom lead to action unless persons will also believe that collective action will lead to constructive change. So I could have critical awareness, I could have behavioral skills, but I what if I don't believe in the fact that collective action can lead to constructive changes? So in the last few months, you may have seen many cynical people who do not believe in the power of collective action, who believe कि धरने पे जाने से क्या होगा, protest करने से क्या होगा. So these are people who do not have sense of collective efficacy. What does efficacy mean? Personal efficacy means the belief in I can. Collective efficacy means the belief that a group can. The belief that citizens acting collectively can shape community life and improve community life by shaping community decisions. So, sense of collective or personal efficacy is contextual. This is again important to understand. Collective or personal efficacy should not be understood as an all pervasive um, skill. What this means is that I may feel a sense of collective efficacy or personal efficacy with respect to a particular situation, but not in another situation. So I could probably go out in the world and fight with, or I wouldn't use the word fight, but I could engage with and change or enforce change or lead movements. But do I have personal efficacy in bringing out change in my personal life, with my family, with my parents, with my children. That. So, um, uh, for instance, you could see, you could take the example of an empowered woman. So you may see a CEO. So okay, I'll take the example of the CEO of Pepsi Co. Indra Nooyi. So Indra Nooyi's one of the interviews, Indra Nooyi actually talked about how um, you know, you women can't have it all, and she narrates this anecdote where she was made the CEO of Pepsi, and she went back home to tell her mother, but her mother did not hear her out, and she said, "Oh, your husband is really tired. You should cater to his needs right now." So, Indra, or something of that, like you can Google the interview and try to find out what exactly were her words. So, essentially, what Indra Nooyi said was that at that moment, I felt that, I was a very empowered individual in my, work setting, but at home, I am a wife, and I'm still treated like that. So, which is what it means. You could be empowered in one place, you could have a sense of belief in your capabilities, capacities in a context and not in another context. Participatory values and commitment. Belief about efficacy are not enough to motivate action. This is very important. I can is not enough. Action, or collective action, individual and collective action, is often motivated by commitment to deeply held values. And if you read interviews of many students, people, young, especially younger people who've come out to protest in the last few months, you would realize a lot of them are talking about how secularism as a value has been violated, and because of which they can't help but come out of their homes and protest. So, critical awareness, participatory skills, collective efficacy, personal efficacy, they're not enough. Your action, along with these factors and skills, comes out from the values that you hold dear, which actually guide your action. So, these values could be a spiritual value, it could be a secular value, social justice. So, Nirbhaya's rapists were hung until death yesterday. But I'm sure a lot of you remember how so many people took to streets after Nirbhaya's rape and murder, horrific rape and murder, in December 16th, 8 years ago. So, and the reason for that was that people felt that justice had been grossly denied to this woman. People had had enough. Men, women, children, young, older, all of them came to the street because they felt that they finally felt that the system had the system had oppressed women for a very, very long period of time. So, other values are caring, integrity, persistence, justice, harmony, honesty, charity. So, these are all values from which the from which values an empowered individual hold that can guide collective action. Finally and lastly, relational connection. Empowerment and citizen participation does not occur in social vacuum. People who engage in citizen participation, leaders, effective leaders, they are they have a wide network of people to count on, relationships, bonding and bridging ties. They mentor people, they are mentored by people, they have what we'd call social capital, they have connections to bank on, they have connections to that because collective action cannot happen with just one individual feeling that they can. They You have to commit to nurturing relationships and taking people along. And the people who personally nurture relations are likely to be more effective in that endeavor.